It's amazing how the guys, and they range from 20 to 65, more comfortable men are now to just share vulnerably where they are and to show their weakness. You build so much trust with the other guys and other brothers and other men there by doing that, and you get so much support by doing it because the guys come afterwards to you or to that guy and say, "Hey man, I'm there for you."
Lenerd, hi.
Hi Pete, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Good seeing you.
We're going to talk about modern masculinity.
Yes, and everything relating that, as you mentioned, also relating that is the whole toxic masculinity and a lot of the criticism men get, and talk about the new man integrating masculine, feminine energies, emotions, intuition in that space. I think brotherhood, men coming together in men's groups, I find it super powerful. I'm part of 3 groups now internationally. Maybe share a little bit of what's happening there.
I go to ancient wisdom and look at it in the context of modern times. I was reading this morning a saying by Confucius where he says, "A man is great not because he has not failed. A man is great because failure has not stopped him." When I read that, I thought to myself, that really emphasizes resilience and perseverance as key qualities of greatness. It suggests that encountering failure is not a detriment, but rather an integral part of the journey towards success. True greatness lies in the ability to persist and learn from setbacks. So this quote really shifts the focus from the avoidance of failure to the response to it. It recognizes that failure is a common experience for everyone. What sets great individuals apart is their determination to continue striving despite difficulties. It underscores that resilience, adaptability, and continuous effort define greatness. To integrate that analysis into modern masculinity, this saying could be used to challenge the notion that men must always be strong, invulnerable, and successful. Instead, it promotes a more nuanced understanding that includes vulnerability and the courage to face and overcome challenges. Confucius reminds us that true greatness isn't about never failing, but how we respond to failure. And traditional views of masculinity pressure men to avoid showing weakness or failure. When we embrace failure as a stepping stone rather than a pitfall, that can lead to personal growth and strength. So modern masculinity needs to celebrate resilience and the courage to keep moving forward, even after setbacks. When we do this, we acknowledge that a man's worth isn't diminished by failure, but enhanced by his persistence and willingness to improve. This approach promotes a healthier, more realistic and empowering model of masculinity, where perseverance and growth are valued over a facade of constant success. So I was mulling over that this morning and just thinking about Confucius in this way and looking at the saying that was attributed to him and trying to look at that. How do I dovetail that into modern masculinity? Because
I love that.
There's a lot of research that suggests men's cortisol levels rise significantly under social rejection, but many modern men lack the emotional tools to process stress, especially the stress of today. If we look at things like testosterone levels in modern men, we know are declining generationally. Some scientists link to environmental factors and lifestyle changes. So there's a whole biological social intersection that raises profound questions about how our modern environment affects male development. Have you ever thought about how these biological changes are influencing male behavior and identity? What do you think men can do to maintain their vitality in an increasingly artificial world?
Sure. The first thing that comes up for me is to remain active as you get older and to exercise. Exercise is great for testosterone and to keep on making love and moving the sexual energy in your body, even if it isn't lovemaking, but self-pleasuring or masturbation, not necessarily to ejaculation, but just to move energy in your body. I believe that's a massive body biohack. I think there's a lot we can do with our bodies, getting exercise. What you said earlier about the facade and the
Yeah.
vulnerability, I think that is so important. My dad was about the silent generation, to be strong and to have all the answers, never show weakness, never show that you don't know, never ask questions about anything, especially in the motive space. And now I'm part of 3 international men's groups. It's amazing to see the vulnerability of the guys. One here in Hout Bay in Cape Town, where we meet once a month and we jump in the sea and quick meditation and then a sharing circle and then just have a braai, a barbecue and a few beers or non-alcoholic beers. It's amazing how the guys, and they range from 20 to 65 in age, more comfortable men are now to just share vulnerably where they are and to show their weakness. You build so much trust with the other guys and other brothers and other men there by doing that. And you get so much support by doing it because the guys come afterwards to you or to that guy and say, hey, man, I'm there for you. I don't think that existed in my dad's time. I think that's modern man is not scared to say that he doesn't have the answer, not scared to say that he's failed, not scared to say that he doesn't have it all together. But from that point, to have resilience and courage to move on from the failure or from the hard time. There's so much pressure on men. It's crazy. And we look at the suicides and the diseases and early deaths, and all of that is relating to stress. It's just because I'm part of these few groups, but probably 95% of men don't have access to this. And they don't have anyone to talk to. And I think that creates a lot of mental illness and disease in the body.
I think that in a world that's rapidly changing, the whole concept of what it means to be a man, it almost feels like it's up for grabs. Amidst the whole noises of concern that people have about defining what a man is, what a woman is, there are timeless principles of strength, honor, and integrity. To me, they remain as relevant as ever. These core values guide men through the complexities of modern life without losing sight of what makes masculinity powerful and honorable. How would you define masculinity in today's world? Do you think traditional values like strength and honor are still relevant?
I believe so. I think it's very relevant. To come back to the brotherhood, your brothers that support you and that you support, you want to be standing next to a guy that you can stand back to back, whether it is facing the enemy in war or facing whatever in life. So honor and reliability is super important. That's what the masculine brings. The masculine brings that protecting the village if it's going to get invaded by the next door village. And maybe we don't have that so much in today's world, but we have that energetically in other spaces. I think that's still very important. The way I see how it may have shifted or is shifting is that maybe 50 or 100 years ago, men were competing against each other. It was more breaking the other guy down. And I think that is shifting. I see a future of more collaboration than competition. I see it in these men's and brotherhood groups that I'm in. Now the guys really support each other. And it's like, how can I help you, brother? How can I lift you up? Not how can I put you down so that I feel better?
Or how can I facilitate a situation whereby you can access the resources to lift yourself up?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's energetic support to help himself.
Exactly. The ancient Greek concept of masculinity centered around arete, which means excellence, and andrea, which means manliness or courage. And Plato's Republic, the ideal man balances physical prowess or warrior virtues, intellectual capacity, philosophical wisdom, moral character, justice, and temperance. This Greek description of men had to negotiate between competitive excellence, like you were saying earlier, and civic responsibility, and between individual glory and community good. So when you look at that, you think, well, how did they do all of that? If we move to medieval times, you had chivalry, didn't you? The medieval period introduced the chivalry code, which combined warrior strength with moral restraint. You had Christian virtues of mercy, humility, and service to others. And we would look through the ages. You go to the Industrial Revolution as an example. there were key shifts of separation and work spheres. There was the rise of the self-made man, the emphasis on rationality and emotional restraint. You look at the self-made man of the 19th century as an example, that marked a huge shift from inherited status to achieved status. That was the marker of masculinity. Then you had world wars, mass trauma, and redefinition of heroism and women's movement, challenging male dominance and civil rights, questioning power structures and sexual revolution, changing gender dynamics. The current research identifies several key themes that there's the integration of emotional intelligence, adaptation to economic changes, balance of strength and vulnerability, and redefinition of success and achievement. Many studies, especially by the American Psychological Association, which says that, I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, I think it was in 2018 that stated that traditional masculinity can be psychologically harmful. And the other thing they stated was that flexibility in gender expression benefits mental health. But social support and emotional openness are crucial. So I think the future of masculinity doesn't lie in rejecting manhood, but in expanding its definition to embrace that whole range of human capabilities. Like you were talking about with the communities, the groups that you're part of.
Yes, I mean, as you were talking about that, what came up for me was modern masculinity is actually the fact of integrating masculine and feminine energies. Let's talk about someone born in a man body. Whether you're born in a man or a woman body, you've got masculine and feminine energies, like sure most people nowadays are aware of. But then let's maybe just talk about in a man body. I think traditionally that wasn't really seen. That was seen as like a man as masculine and a woman as feminine, maybe 50 or 100 years ago. I think modern masculinity for me is the acceptance and embracing of the feminine inside. Modern masculinity for me is actually the fact that you also have a feminine inside you and you're integrating and playing and dancing with the masculine and feminine energies inside you. The old school masculinity was denying the feminine inside, broadly speaking, and modern masculinity is really embracing the feminine in psyche. If you look at the soul, it doesn't seem to be masculine or feminine, but then those energies come, you're born into a man body. I have a clear feeling that in other lives, I've probably been in female bodies. I don't remember past lives, but I'm a soul that have had masculine lives and feminine lives. I think mainly masculine because I tend to be more towards the masculine space. But since 10 years ago, I started embracing my feminine, Peter, it really expanded my life and it expanded my masculinity because I wasn't denying and suppressing things. I was dropping into my emotions. I was trusting my intuition. I was being receptive. I was being more nurturing to myself, not just driving and hitting and creating stuff, but be receptive and listen and wait and trust and flow. That added so much more to my life. And I think that's the beauty for men out there in the new earth and in modern masculinity. I think there's now a better acceptance and understanding that you can do that. I think 50 years ago, a guy walked around and said, I'm in touch with my feminine and I've met my women inside. You would have probably been just made fun of and would be probably social suicide. But I think now the consciousness have lifted. I'm super passionate about awakening of this planet. I'm super passionate about modern masculinity and healthy, mature masculinity. The time is right now for people. There's so much acceptance of that. For men to drop into their deep inner journey, to get to know themselves and be not just, directive for their energy, but also receptive and open.
There's a 2/3, 1/3 principle at play. What I mean is you can be in conscious, semi-conscious at one time. So now I'm in conscious and semi-conscious. But when I'm asleep, I'm in unconscious and semi-conscious. Like your finger, it has 3 parts to it, but I can only move 2/3 of it at one time. 3 parts to your arm, but you can only move 2/3 of it at one time. In terms of the masculine and feminine, and I'm talking about the energies rather than gender, it makes me wonder whether we are 2/3 masculine and 1/3 feminine. For the feminine, they are 2/3 feminine and 1/3 masculine. Do we not look for the higher part of ourselves in a partner?
So what I've seen, I think generally speaking, that is true. But what I have seen is that there is maybe a smaller percentage where it may even be alpha, or it's 2/3 the other way, where you may be in a man body, but you may be 2/3 feminine and 1/3 masculine. I've known friends and been around in that space, which is just their energy. I don't know percentages to it, but I think you're right, 80%. I think probably, and I'm just making this up now, probably 80% of men are 2/3 masculine and feminine. But I think there is an X percentage, call it 20%, that is. I think women are mainly feminine, but I mean, I'm sure you also know women which are pretty masculine.
There's an element of that because I'm looking at natural laws and things that are irrefutable. It's a bit like gravity. You jump off the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building, you will die. That's a given. If you look at a tree, you see 2/3 of it, 1/3's under the ground. Yeah. When you meet someone, you're meeting the 2/3 of them. They're conscious and they're semi-conscious, what they've been programmed with, what they talk about. You're not meeting the unconscious. Historically, as masculinity has been associated with strength and resilience and the capacity to protect and provide. These are all valuable traits that still remain relevant today, but the evolution of masculinity, to my mind, isn't about making men soft. It's not about feminizing women in the sense of losing those strengths, but it's rather about expanding the definition of what it means to be masculine, because when we recognize and manage emotions, that isn't about weakness. It's about developing a different kind of resilience. It takes strength to be vulnerable, to seek help when needed, to navigate complex emotions without being overwhelmed. The traditional virtues of physical prowess and stoicism, I'm not discarding those. I think they need to be complemented by emotional, mental health awareness, emotional intelligence. Those are necessary in the modern world. It's not about blurring boundaries. I'm not talking about erasing masculinity. It's the recognition that the traits that traditionally are associated with it, like strength, leadership, and courage, are not limited to one gender.
Yes.
And they can coexist with qualities like empathy and nurturing.
Definitely. And it's a dance.
It's the yin and yang.
Yin and yang, and exactly. And it coexists. And in certain situations, you would act and utilize the one energy or combination of it, or sometimes the other energy. It's just if you want to go from this point to that point, you're going to drop into your masculine. You want to get there quickly. You have to drop into the penetrative masculine energy. Analytical, boom, I want to go there. That would be applicable there if you run a business and you want your staff to be happy, productive, and great with clients. Then you want to listen to them. You want to be receptive. You want to talk to them and how's their day been? How can you make their day better? How can you help them best so that they can help the client best? For that, you need receptive energy. You need to listen and be receptive, feminine energies. You're going to sit back and listen and okay, well, how was the day? How can we make things better in this place? Those are very much the yin energies. And in that case, utilizing that will be great for your business. The next day, maybe in a board meeting and you're like, okay, we need to get from this result to that result next year. If you go into connection with, let's say, the opposite sex, with women, sometimes with your partner or your girlfriend, you want to be in a masculine energy, but sometimes you also want to be in a receptive energy. Sometimes you want to lead and she wants to know where we're going to go tonight. And say, oh, I've got a place booked. Let's go there. And you take control. That could be very sexy for her. But sometimes you also want to receive and lay back. She could caress you or she could give to you and for you receive and for you just to be in that space, to be soft with her and be flowing with her. So it's a dance. I really think it's a dance from second to second. That's what's so much fun.
You're talking about Having a certain level of adaptability, especially in today's society, because rigid roles can sometimes hinder personal growth and societal progress. When we're more adaptable, we can thrive in diverse roles, whether it's in leadership or caregiving or partnerships, without being confined to outdated stereotypes. I was looking at the shift towards more inclusive definitions of masculinity. I wonder if it's viewed as a practical adaptation to a rapidly changing world, where there are discussions about what is modern masculinity, what is a man, what is a woman. Workplaces, relationships, and societal structures are evolving, and so is the understanding of what it means to be a man. We live in a patriarchal society, but leaders who exhibit empathy and communication skills, what I've seen, especially with clients, they're often more effective. Relationships, as an example, partners who are emotionally available tend to build stronger connections. These aren't about diminishing masculinity, but enhancing it with skills that are increasingly valuable. It's important to preserve the core values of masculinity. I believe it is important to preserve those core values like strength and honor, your word is your bond, and responsibility, while also embracing the flexibility to grow, adapt. And this isn't about turning men into feminine wallflowers. It's about allowing men to be their fullest selves, capable of both traditional masculine traits and the emotional depth that modern society requires from us.
Yes, and isn't that exciting? You can actually drop into your emotions, really feel yourself, and you can express, and you can also bring that to the world. You were talking about empathy with clients and staff. I saw in a business 10 years ago, I left the business as I traveled the world and wrote a book and all of that. But 10 years ago, businesses we had, the guys didn't want to leave these businesses that we started. Even they get often more salary. They didn't want to leave because they felt like it was a family and they felt nurtured. And I've started with one person, but later on with 400 people. But these 400 men and women in their 20s mainly felt like part of this family. And it was because of that receptive energy about talking to these guys and really care. I'm not making it up because people can feel through that. And that doesn't make you weaker. That makes you even stronger. If the guy messes up, you're still going to have a discussion with him and give him a warning and final written warning and eventually say to him, listen, let's part ways if it doesn't work. So it doesn't make you weak. You can set strong boundaries. That's sometimes where things go wrong, maybe to talk broader than business, is that sometimes people say the modern man, drop into your emotions and drop into your heart and your intuition, be receptive and be nurturing. That is so true. But then they sometimes think that now you must become soft and you can't have boundaries. The setting of boundaries is still super important. I totally agree with what you're saying, to drop into those things I just mentioned, but also to be firm with your boundaries.
Empathy doesn't make men weaker. Empathy and care are strengths. It makes you more attuned. From my experience, when you drop into empathy and care as part of core strengths, it makes me more attuned to the needs of those I might lead, connect with, and protect. It allows for better communication, stronger relationships, and not only that, you also get a deeper understanding of others' perspectives. When you have a deeper understanding of another's perspective, that can reinforce, as distinct from diminishing leadership, the protective nature of a man in a modern context involves more than physical strength. It's also about providing emotional safety, creating environments where those around us can thrive. As a man, I can protect both physically and emotionally, tapping into a broader spectrum of strength. That's really the highest common factor, or one of them, rather than the lowest common denominator. Because when I talk about the highest common factor and raising the modern masculine to their highest common factor, it's about the encouragement to be well-rounded, strong in body, strong in spirit, steadfast in commitment, but capable of emotional intelligence. This isn't about abandoning traditional masculinity, but enhancing it to meet the demands of the modern world. Physical strength remains important. Today's world demands mental fortitude. It demands emotional resilience. When we can navigate complex emotional landscapes without losing our grounding, we're stronger, we're not weaker. These remain central for me in terms of things like honor, integrity. My word is my bond. I'm going to stand by my principles. I'm going to have the ability to lead my life with courage. But there's an additional layer of empathy, which doesn't detract from this, it deepens it. That enables and empowers me to have better assessment, better leadership, and balance tradition with modernity.
Yes. And that courage, what you're talking about in terms of courage, it takes a lot of courage to drop into vulnerability. It takes a lot of courage to drop into your emotions and to feel your emotions and to face it and to witness it and to talk about it or express it or release it. So that strength of the masculine in terms of the strong body and the courage of defending, that same courage can be used in terms of what I've just mentioned, in terms of the vulnerability and dropping into the emotions. So it's a massive virtue to be able to be vulnerable. I know guys that will jump over 100-meter cliff and be vulnerable and into the sea and like do crazy things, fight 6 other big guys, but don't ask them to be vulnerable. It takes more courage, I believe, to be vulnerable.
I know you're part of these groups, and we're seeing unprecedented rates of loneliness and isolation. There are many studies showing that men have significantly fewer close relationships than previous generations. The physical impact of this isolation includes things like inflammation markers, reduced immune function, and I wonder what's driving this epidemic of male loneliness. Maybe you can shed some light from the groups you're part of, and how can men rebuild meaningful bonds without falling into patterns of emotional suppression?
Yes, Peter, as you're talking, it's actually a UK study that I saw a year ago. The percentages are roughly right. Just between 18 and 30 are asked, have you had sex in the preceding 12 months? 33% of them haven't had any sex in the last year, and they're 18 to 30 years old. This is whether you're single, relationship. A third of men, that is just the sexuality. And if they're not having sex, then they're probably also not having contact with women's sensuality, body contact, and they probably don't have intimacy with women or with anyone. For me, that's super scary, super shocking. So here you, and there seems to be good research pointing out to the same thing. There's so much pressure on men to have all the answers. There aren't structures in place for them to talk to anyone if they find themselves in a tough spot. Patriarchy, Me Too campaign, all of that stuff, all the backlashes, and a lot of it is super valid to bring out the unhealthy masculine and criticize that. That's perfectly okay. But there has been a backlash in the sense that a lot of men are very uncertain about how to be in this world and how to be with women. Especially young men in their 20s come out and they don't actually really know how to speak to women. Is it okay to even ask a number? Am I going to be a predator if I flirt with her? That is creating a lot of uncertainty. It's almost as if in a lot of circles, masculinity isn't welcome. A lot of the younger men that I find come to a point where so I have this campaign where I say, proud to be a man. I talked to these guys in Cape Town the other day, like there were 30 guys there, they're all in their 20s. They call it proud to be a man. There were like 30, 40 guys there. So they were like, wow. In some circles, just those words will be almost triggering people. Some people may even look at that as a bad thing to say, proud to be a man. So some of the young guys, just to have the permission to say, hey man, masculinity is welcome here and is very much needed. Patriarchy has caused a lot of damage to the feminine. But I tell you, it also caused a lot of damage to the masculine, especially the young guys. These young guys in their 20s only got born the other day. They weren't even part of all the previous stuff. They come into this world and they're almost not welcome. That breaks my heart, is to see the young guys very uncertain, to see them almost not belonging, to see them not knowing how to connect with a woman or approach a woman, which then means that they get isolated. Then some of them get drawn into pornography. And then it makes it even more difficult to connect with real women because now you have the screen babe, as I call it. And then often you ejaculate to that. So there's less incentive the next day to talk to women. And I'm not talking even sexuality, just to be intimate and have conversations. I think men are getting seriously isolated because so many of this environmental kind of stuff happening. Conversations like this, Peter, gives them to start opening it and for people to understand it a bit better. We're taught algebra and English and Afrikaans at school, but we're not taught anything about what energies are in our bodies, masculine and feminine energies. We're not getting any of this training. And I'm hoping, I'm seeing a world where that is part of the curriculum.
I think it should be part of an education. The curriculum imposed in many institutions has a certain agenda to it. What we need is a true education. Young men are increasingly withdrawing from traditional social institutions. Marriage rates are dropping. People in the workforce participation is declining. Social engagement is decreasing. We're seeing new forms of male community emerging online and in alternative spaces. Do you think we're witnessing a male rebellion against societal expectations, or do you think that this withdrawal is a sign of something deeper happening in male psychology?
I think it's maybe both. In the States, it's a bit of a rebellion, and I don't know all the detail of it. That's why some guys talking in the space get a lot of popularity. The Tate guy, for example, right out there to the one extreme, and they actually get popular. So there's a bit of rebellion in that space. I think that's happening, but there's also a lot of uncertainty with men. I don't think that needs to be there. Just communicating and making it part of the education system and creating space for men to talk about these things and to do the inner work and to drop in themselves. I think that will be hugely helpful. The way I look at it, Peter, and I know you're also very passionate about the awakening of the planet and consciousness, I think it's just meant to be. I think it's part of the process. It's one of the pieces of humanity waking up.
One of the other areas is dating. There's somebody I was talking to about going on these online dating apps. I can see the rise of online dating has fundamentally altered male-female dynamics, with studies showing that 80% of women compete for the top 20% of men on these dating apps. That's created new social hierarchies and tensions. Do you think there's a way that men can navigate modern dating, as an example, while maintaining authentic masculinity without falling into the pickup artist or the manipulation or the passive resignation?
I think the solution there for those guys is to actually get out in the real world and at the coffee shop, at the gym, in the street. I know it's difficult and it takes a lot of courage to do the discussion and the approach there through friends and so on. I totally get it on the dating app. That same research that I referred to earlier was actually talking about the same thing. It said the problem with the dating apps is there are men that don't have a master's degree or even a degree. That's the things you see on a dating app, they become invincible because they don't have those things. But if that woman swiped them left, if she actually saw him at the beach or the coffee shop and saw his sense of humor and how he held his body, she might actually be interested in this guy. But because it's a dating app and it's like a spreadsheet, she just go, no, this isn't going to work. Boom. So I think that's where the challenge is for a lot of men. It becomes almost like a spreadsheet and the personality doesn't come across. I know a lot of people are online now, but I almost sense that the best is to try in the real world, make contact with women.
You got to work at it then, haven't you?
Yeah, and you have to
talk to them, and you got to talk to each other and interact with your energies. I was looking at Rites of Passage, where men went through these traditional masculine rites of passage, and they've disappeared from Western society. They've been stripped out of our education. And I think that has left many men without clear markers of maturity or achievement. That whole vacuum of meaning has led to what I would call extended adolescence and uncertainty. And you talked about uncertainty earlier, about male identity. It makes me wonder what modern rites of passage could help guide young boys into healthy manhood, and how could we create these without falling into artificials or commercialized substitutes?
I think it's super important for a boy, if you're 18 or 16 or 13 or 21, to have a rite of passage. I know in the Jewish tradition at 30, and my Jewish friends, I said it seems to be very powerful for them. I was 18 and I went with my dad, his brothers, 6 brothers, and we went hunting in Namibia, in the desert. And after shooting my big buck, I had to eat raw liver with bitter, whatever, tripped over it. Afterwards, down that with half a cup of brandy. It was a bit rough, but it was a rite of passage for me because other guys made such a big deal of me shooting that buck in the desert. For me, it was a rite of passage. It was like, wow, man, these older men accepted me. And yes, you're a man. You're like amazing. And then having to do that wasn't really fun, chewing this raw liver. But I have to do it. That also takes courage. What I did with my son is when he turned 18, we went touring in Jordan and in Istanbul, just me and him, just the two of us. We were in the desert and spending time together for 2 weeks. I said to him, my boy, this is now after matric and finishing school. This is now your rite of passage as being a man. You didn't have to do any crazy stuff, but it was just for him like a watershed, moving into another world, into another level. I really think that's important. We used to have in South Africa the army thing. I think for a lot of guys, that was also good. There was also not terrible things of having to be in a border. I don't think that's necessarily a good way to do it. But it did play a role for some of those guys to quickly from 17 to 18 become men. I believe that we need to do that with our young people. Women also need to have rite of passage, but specifically men. Even if it is just taking the guys for a walk, we can walk into the mountains here in Cedarburg in South Africa. I think psychologically it makes a big difference. It gives you a substance. It gives you a bit of a strength in your stomach or in your balls there. Something beautiful about older men saying, welcoming you and saying, hey man, you're a man, you're part of us and we're proud of you. Something really beautiful and healing and powerful in that.
Through a rite of passage, you find resources. A lot of people talk about ascending, but you have to go into the descent, into the shadow. When you go into the depths of your shadow, as Jung calls it, that's where the gold is, because historically, men found purpose through protection, provision, and conquest. In today's modern world, these roles, these traditional roles, they're less relevant today. Many men struggle to find meaningful ways to express their masculine energy. It makes me wonder, how can men channel their natural drive for achievement and protection in ways that benefit modern society rather than conflict with it?
To give you another example, I did something last year called the Mankind Project, which was super powerful, like a warrior training or initiation weekend. There were guys there from 20 to 70. No, there's one guy there that was actually 75, I think. That was also like a rite of passage. It was also a lot of shadow work. You put on a carpet and you actually drop into your shadows. So that's just one example. There are so many of these trainings, men's trainings around the world. I've seen the guys every 2 weeks we meet, and this is now a year later. I see fellow brothers there, and I see how they have grown and expanded by dropping into their shadows, as you say, as Jung says, and that's where the gold is. I've seen guys transform, but to just say, hey, look at this. I can't force anyone to do anything. But that's why it's so beautiful, these discussions and what you're doing, because just putting it out there, just comes across someone's space and they go, oh, wow, maybe I should look into this.
When I look at the cultural conversation and the narratives, especially mainstream media, portrays masculinity as either toxic or ineffectual, what that translates to is that many men feel there's no mainstream space for discussing legitimate male concerns without being labeled as regressive or misogynistic. We need to create balanced conversations about masculinity that acknowledge both male struggles and responsibilities in today's world, because there is a rise of male mentorship movements and men's groups. It suggests a hunger for masculine wisdom and guidance. But the danger is these spaces can become polarized between traditional patriarchal views and complete rejection of masculinity itself. So, in terms of the groups that you're part of, what does healthy male mentorship look like today, and how can it avoid both toxic traditionalism and overcorrection towards complete gender neutrality?
Yes, what my experience with the three groups that are now, and one is the Mankind Project, another one is Father, Sons, and Brothers, which is a good friend of mine, Gareth Pickering, that he started, international Zoom call with a lot of international people. Another one is a friend of mine started here in Hout Bay in Cape Town, Brotherhood of Light. I love the name. So my experience with those three groups is that I don't see the danger that you mentioned there. I haven't seen that come up. I just saw the support and the vulnerability. I think you have to be experienced to hold these groups and to put it together. There must be a bit of experience, openness, and the guys must have done some work. I also have seen at festivals, men's groups, the guys put together, it gets all about dominance and control, and it goes a bit south. So there is a danger. But you know what, Peter, just by starting and testing different groups out and finding the ones that work for you, that's already a start. Bringing it out to the world.
It's wonderful work you're doing. You're almost acting like an elder, not in a patriarchal or hierarchical structure, but as a mentor and elder. A lot of young men report feeling a lack of purpose in a world where the roles of the masculine, of male roles, are changing, but simultaneously we're seeing new forms of achievement and contribution emerging in technology and creativity and social innovation. From your group lens and the work that you do, what does it mean to be successful as a man in today's world, and how can men find purpose beyond the traditional status markers?
I think if you're at peace with yourself, that is the ultimate success. If you know yourself, love yourself, and you have a deep soul relationship, soul connection with yourself. Gareth and myself are doing a joint sexual mastery relationship course now, like a 12-week course. What we're talking about is to become your own soulmate. So helping guys to improve their relationships or get relationships. But it starts from the basis of becoming your own soulmate. You have to become first what you seek. For me, that's the biggest success part, is to really love yourself. It can sound like a bumper sticker, but to really know yourself and drop into your own relationship with yourself and be at peace with yourself. And if you're in that space, then yes, you need health and you need wealth to survive. You need a balanced way of living on a 3D world here, three-dimensional, horizontal phase, as Eckhart Tolle says, but also to be in the vertical space, connected with spirits, God, the earth, and to meet the divine inside yourself.
It's important that there's a disconnect between biological male drives and modern social expectations, and these create unique tensions. As men, we still carry ancient circuits for protection, provision, and competition. Yet we must navigate these impulses in a world that I would say often labels them as problematic. So projects you're doing enables men to honor their natural masculine drives while adapting them to serve rather than conflict with modern society when they become their own soulmate. As it said in the inscription, the Temple of Delphi is know thyself.
I agree.
We've explored some aspects of the enduring principles of masculinity and how they can be redefined in the context of modern times. In terms of looking to the future, this is an ongoing conversation around masculinity, and it's going to evolve and evolve. But the challenge here is to ensure traditional values like strength, honor, responsibility, and your word is your bond. You need to remain relevant while adapting to the needs of a modern, more inclusive society. What do you think the future holds for the concept of masculinity, and how can men prepare to meet the demands of the future while staying true to their principles?
Support of brothers is a big part. Collaboration and realizing you can't do it on your own. Being in circles with other men, broader spiritual awakening and working yourself and all of that, specifically on the masculinity part, To have brothers around you, men you trust, and whose word is their bond, creating that circle around you. And for the world to have more of that, where strength and integrity is super important, but then also empathy and receptiveness and listening. I think that's amazing. That's the new earth we're building. If we build more men with those qualities, and it's an ongoing journey, you grow from strength to strength. If you grow on that journey and you surround you with men that do the same, you start vibrating that out into the world. That's, for me, a beautiful, positive story about where masculinity can go.
In wrapping up, we've explored some of the enduring principles of masculinity and how they can be redefined to fit our modern context. But I think the path forward also involves holding on to what makes masculinity strong and honourable while embracing growth and adaptation. What's the one message you want listeners to take away about modern masculinity?
That masculinity is welcome in this world and very much needed. And for men to embrace that and to feel it in their body, that they're welcome here and they're super important and super needed in this world.
And where can people find you? Where can people look out for your work, the projects you're involved in?
The best is my website, because from there you can go to all the social media and YouTube channel, and my book is also there. And it's lenerdlou.com, LENERDLOU.com. From there you can navigate, and there's a lot of free resources on the website. My book Jump is there. From there, very open to people. Are actually happy to have a exploratory chat with anyone. You can click there and you can book a chat. I love talking about these things.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for engaging in this initial discussion, Lenerd. I really appreciate it and appreciate the work that you're doing and the contribution you're making with these projects. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. I always love our chats. Thank you, man.